Springfield's Talk 104.1 and a good Tuesday morning, friends. Ooh, it's cold. Is it not terribly cold when you walked outside this
Yes.
morning?
Ugh. I thought spring was gonna be here.
It's winter time out there. It's very unpleasant, unless you like the cold weather. High of 48, wind chill 16. Overnight low, just dipping below freezing. It is, well, one day this week it's going to be nicer. We'll have a look at that coming up here in just a couple of moments. Of course, we are days away, but we still will have the Friday Road Show on Friday at Scramblers. Don't forget also, get yourself signed up for the Retro Metro Lunch Bunch at ksgf.com. In addition to that, at ksgf.com, we have the Biden quote deal. That is the Biden's Best Quote Bracket Challenge. And if you participate in that, that will enter you for a prize from Pyramid Roofing Company. It's not going to be shingles or anything roof related. It's
You get roofing nails.
yeah, you get a box of roofing nails. Woo! They're expensive. Fool your friends. Have fun at parties. Nothing like that. But there will be a prize there, and it's not based off of your accuracy of the Biden bracket. The way the bracket works, we've been through the first round, so we should be in the second round right now, correct?
Yes.
And you listen to the Biden quotes and pick your favorite. So that participation will help us determine what his best quote has been. And every week that you participate, that is an entry into the randomized drawing, and whomever wins will get, I think it's about $200 value, but we don't know exactly what it is yet, right? We were having this discussion the other day. We couldn't, well, did we settle on anything?
I think we did, but I don't want to announce it.
Yeah, I know. Maybe better not. We'll find out perhaps today. Can you cover the promotions meeting today? I've got to
Yes.
do some recording of a client.
be
So
there.
okay, good. So maybe you can pull the trigger on that and make it official. How's that sound?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
$200 worth of wallflowers from Bath and Body Works. You're going to have a lot of them.
No, well, you'd probably get like 6.
Yeah, well, hey, I watch, you can get them 3 1/4 sometimes. If you time it right and you keep on top of it, and that's not too bad of a deal. I know some people don't like those things in their home, but anyway. There is a piece that I thought I would share with you. Sarah Westwood wrote it up in the Washington Examiner, and it is separating fact from fiction in the Silicon Valley bank blame game. There are finger pointing that is going on. You have some that note they're pretty woke and attribute the eye off the ball to wokeness. There are a number of Democrats that, of course, say it's Trump's fault because everything's Trump's fault. And of which that whole scenario is ridiculous anyhow, because if it were, they claim it was Trump's fault because he deregulated. Well, Biden, first couple of years, Democrats controlled everything. Why did they not put the regulations back in place? If this was such that deregulation so clearly a dangerous move that made investors vulnerable to this sort of run on the bank, why did Elizabeth Warren not propose legislation in the Senate? Why did Nancy Pelosi not? Why was there no joint resolution? Why were the regulations not put back into place? Democrats did have complete, total, 100% control of everything for the first couple of years of Biden's administration. So if the deregulatory component is to blame, they're to blame for keeping it in place. I'll share that this piece, and it is somewhat insightful. I know a lot of people are very in tune with how these things work. They're very in tune with what causes these sorts of scenarios, what sort of red flags are there. But there are a lot of people, a lot of you, that are extremely intelligent people and smart with money, but this is not your world. You have no idea. There are certain components to these things in the financial world that I am clueless on, that it's not my area of complete expertise. I try to, probably like normal people, keep up and figure out, well, what's going on, comb through it. But I'm not somebody that has this financial background that a lot of people do, to where if they're talking, you're like, I don't even understand what you're saying at this point. So I wanted to share with you this piece, and I think it breaks it down in a way that the average person can have an understanding as to who's at fault, who's not at fault. The Washington Examiner piece, ultimately, my assessment is there are a number of different factors that came into play that caused this particular situation to take place. The one thing that most people tend to agree on is that the Biden administration is lying when they're saying that there's not going to be a bailout. They're saying there's not going to be a bailout, but there's going to be a bailout, but it's not a bailout, as is usual with this particular administration. American Transmissions talk and text line 447 KSGF. Jason Ryma with news. And the first alert forecast, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvement. Sunny, 48 today, wind chill 16. Clear tonight, 31, 60 tomorrow. Thursday, 62 with rain, and then a colder Friday, mostly sunny with a high of 40. SVB collapse, sorting fact from fiction in Silicon Valley bank blame game after the stunning collapse on Friday of a major bank. For the technology sector, critics on both sides of the aisle blame their political opponents for contributing to the meltdown. Silicon Valley Bank, mid-sized institution that finished last year with nearly $200 billion in deposits, shuttered Friday, reopened Monday under the direction of federal regulators. The blame game started almost immediately in Washington and on Wall Street as fears of a broader fallout mounted. Here are the facts surrounding some of the loudest claims about SVB. This is a Washington Examiner piece. How did it go so wrong? SVB leaders had made a series of investments over the past 2 years that put the bank in a position of weakness. But the sudden nature of the collapse last week materialized when its clients began to panic and attempt to withdraw their money en masse. The bank had swelled in size since 2021 because cash was flowing freely and more companies from the tech industry were putting their money into SVB than ever before. Deposits at SVB doubled in 2021, and the bank found itself with more money than it could lend out to the startups, venture capitalists, and tech companies that typically line up to do business with it. SVB executives put chunks of the new cash into investments that are usually considered low risk, government bonds and government-backed mortgage securities, the latter of which are more highly regulated after the 2008 financial crisis. SVB's problem began when the Federal Reserve started raising interest rates because the value of its securities then fell significantly as interest rates climb. The hit from rising interest rates wasn't immediate. However, SVB would only sustain losses from those investments if they had to sell them while rates were still high. SVB arrived at that crossroads recently because the economic downturn caused by inflation, interest rates, and a lack of new investment in the tech industry meant the bank's clients started pulling out their money at a faster pace than usual just to keep their businesses afloat. Now, I will tell you, there's the theme here, the underlying theme is a crappy economy. The Biden administration continues to tell us how wonderful things are. Everything is just going swimmingly. It's the best economy we've ever had. You've never seen anything this great. If you don't understand that, there's something wrong with you. But it's because of inflation. It's because of the interest rate hikes in an attempt to roll back some of the damaging aspects of inflation. This is the foundation for what caused things begin to fall. To keep up with the pace of withdrawals, SVB had to sell some of its securities at a loss. And on Wednesday, the bank announced it had lost $1.8 billion on the sale of securities that had been much more valuable when the interest rates were low. That news, coupled with a failed effort by SVB to raise more capital, spooked the bank's clients and caused a bank run, which means so many clients showed up at the same time to pull their money out that the bank ran out of cash and had to close. The visual, of course, is it's a Wonderful Life sort of scenario where everybody's showing. Of course, it's not the way that it works today because of the digital component, but that's the sort of scenario where everybody's like, I got to get my money out, got to get my money. Oh, we don't have any. Is SVB getting a bailout? Some Republicans accuse the Biden administration of offering to bail out the bank, which would be a politically unpopular move after bank bailouts during the Obama administration sparked a backlash. It would also give Biden a political headache because many of the bank's clients are wealthy and work in elite industries, so a taxpayer-funded bailout just would not look good for a president who often touts his connection to blue-collar America. Nikki Haley, former South Carolina governor running for the GOP presidential nominee, said yesterday Joe Biden's pretending this isn't a bailout. It is. Now depositors at healthy banks are forced to subsidize Silicon Valley Bank's mismanagement. Representative Nancy Mace, Republican South Carolina, told CNN, we cannot keep bailing out private companies because there are no consequences for their actions. The federal government has said all depositors in SVB will eventually get all their money back, not just up to the $250,000 level that the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation guarantees, and even depositors not insured by the FDIC will get their money returned under the plan. Which, of course, for many people, provokes the question, what's the point in being FDIC insured if you're going to have elected officials come in and say, well, even if you're not, don't worry about it, we'll make sure you're taken care of. All that being said, the Biden administration still insists that SVB is not getting a bailout. The Fed, FDIC, and Treasury Department said in a joint statement Sunday, no losses associated with the resolution of Silicon Valley Bank will be borne by the taxpayer. Instead, the agencies declared a special assessment on banks would repay what the FDIC plans to cover. That means money paid into the FDIC by other banks that enjoy insurance coverage for their deposits will go towards paying out all of the accounts at SVB. That means taxpayer dollars are not technically covering the losses of the bank. It's just your dollars and your bank are going to. However, banks that are not guaranteed the same treatment from the federal government will shoulder the cost of cleaning up the SVB mess. The federal government is only obligated to repay deposits up to $250,000 each when a bank fails, and only for depositors insured by the FDIC. Critics of the Biden administration approach in this case have questioned whether future failed banks will expect the same treatment from federal regulators. The Fed also made a generous loan program available for banks that might have the same problem as SVB. Too much money invested in Treasury securities that have lost too much value since interest rates started climbing. Banks with similar exposure can apply for loans through a new vehicle, the Bank Term Funding Program, that will let eligible institutions get one-year loans from the federal government by borrowing against their securities. The program is generous because, according to the Fed, banks can borrow against the value of their securities as reflected on their balance sheets, not against the value of the securities would actually hold today if they were sold. Federal officials said that the loan program's goal is eliminating an institution's need to quickly sell those securities in time of stress. Who will foot the bill for the loans program? Federal officials said the Treasury Department will make $25 billion available as a backstop for the loans, which the Biden administration hopes not to use. Quote, the Federal Reserve does not anticipate that it will be necessary to draw on these bank stop funds. Still, the loan program could deepen the perception that the government is propping up banks and financial institutions that made bad bets on the economy. In this case, underestimating the risk that inflation could bring interest rate hikes after Congress poured so much money into the economy following the pandemic. You notice how so many of these problems go back to moves that the government made in order to fix other problems? Many of you either have been in the position or you know someone who has been in the position that has suffered from an illness, and they go to the doctor and they are prescribed some sort of medicine, and after a week or two, it makes them very, very sleepy. So they go back and then they get another drug to counter that. And then before you know it, there's 12 to 14 different drugs they're taking, each one to counter some sort of negative impact or side effect of the previous prescribed drug. That is what oftentimes we recognize occurs with the government. Here, let's make this move. Let's print money, print money, print money, print money. That causes inflation. Well, let's raise interest rates in order to take care of the inflationary issue. Well, then you have this problem that occurs with it. It's just one after another, and every time the government comes in with some new medicine to try to stave off the negative side effects of the previous medicine. Now, what about wokeness? Is wokeness to blame? They address this particular issue as well. I'll share that in moments. I'm Nick Reed. As we talk about interest rates, it being one of the many components, the spokes in the wheel that have, in one form or another, contributed to the SVB collapse. The one place you can get 0% financing is Floors Plus. Floors Plus, all of your flooring plus needs, different hardwood floors, luxury vinyl planking, carpeting, tiling, you name it, they can do it. Their craftsmanship is incredible. And in addition to that, 12 months, 0% financing. That's Floors Plus in Nixa and Springfield. Is wokeness to blame? The Washington Examiner notes that some Republicans point the finger at the liberal leanings of some SVB leaders, claiming the bank's top executives become more concerned with progressivism than business decisions. Governor Ron DeSantis, Florida, said Sunday on Fox News, referring to diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, it appears to me, this bank, they're so concerned with DEI and politics and all that stuff. I think that really diverted from them focusing on the core mission. With its California location and liberal clientele, SVB unsurprisingly embraces progressivism. Jay Ursepa, the bank's head of financial risk at its UK branch, pushed extensive LGBT campaigns through the company, touted being a, quote, queer person of color, and promoted, quote, safe spaces at the bank, according to the New York Post. The bank also heavily promoted its diversity commitment in leadership, which one Wall Street Journal columnist suggested was a possible factor in why management failed so spectacularly. Quote, I'm not saying 12 white men would have avoided this mess, but the company may have been distracted by diversity demands, the columnist Andy Kessler wrote on Sunday. But even if executives were too preoccupied with progressive pieties to make better investment decisions, that was not the direct cause of the bank's failure. Few in the industry appear to perceive the risk that too many long-term investments could pose, and the problem extends far beyond liberal Silicon Valley's top bank. Signature Bank in New York City also closed its doors on Sunday after the SVB collapse, facing a similar run on deposits from customers who panicked after seeing what happened on the opposite coast. By the way, there's a whole nother story about how cringe-worthily woke Signature Bank, and evidently they spent millions of dollars producing these videos of them. They would take popular songs, a Katy Perry song, another song, and they would rewrite the words and have what appear to be very high quality videos touting how much better they are than other banks, how they, Signature Bank, looks out for your investments as opposed to the bigger banks that just want your money. Of course, that did not age very well given the situation that Signature Bank is in today. Now, this piece notes that despite the woke nature and the focus of that by Signature Bank is more closely associated with cryptocurrency and face systemic risk than were not identified to SVB's problems. So in other words, noting that there were other issues there. Now, what about the deregulation? We've got to get a traffic update, and this is there's two more areas they address, the deregulation, and this is where Democrats try to claim, just like the border, just like Russia, just like the weather balloon, just like everything else under the sun, or the spy balloon, it's Trump's fault, and that Trump is responsible for this. And then Peter Thiel, a tech mogul and Republican donor, he has come under scrutiny because the Thursday before this happened, he pulled his money out, which they're claiming because he was such a significant investor. That's what caused people to panic. If Peter Thiel knows something and he's pulling his money out, then the rest of us should. And so some people are blaming him for the beginning of the dominoes falling as well. So those final two components in the Washington Examiner coming up next. A traffic update first. I'm Nick Reed. A1 Custom Car Care, all of your car care needs, check engine light, get it checked. Don't put it off. There's no real upside to that. If anything, you get peace of mind. Oftentimes, it's not that big of a deal. But it can lead to other things if it goes ignored. Peace of mind. A1 Custom Car Care, all of those car care needs. First Alert Forecast, sponsored by Navant. Employee benefits that work. Sunny 48 for a high today. Clear 31 tonight. Cloud 61 tomorrow. Thursday, rain 62, and then only a high of 40 on Friday. The SVB collapse, sorting fact from fiction and Silicon Valley blame game. The last two areas that are covered here, deregulation, it's the go-to for Democrats, Trump's fault. And then, did Peter Thiel play a role? And you may say, who's that? We'll get to that here in a moment. For their part, Democrats have claimed a law signed by then-President Donald Trump in 2018 paved the way for the SVB collapse by removing key safeguards put in place after the global financial crisis. Senator Elizabeth Warren wrote in the New York Times op-ed Monday, "No one should be mistaken about what unfolded over the past few days in the U.S. banking system. These recent bank failures are the direct result of leaders in Washington weakening the financial rules." And again, I'll note, she's a leader in Washington, and Democrats had control of everything the 2 years after Trump was president. So if this was such a glaring red flag, the deregulation in this capacity, why did they not fix it? Greg Becker, the CEO of SVB, testified before Congress in 2018 that the rollback was necessary for smaller banks like his own because they simply did not have the same resources to comply with all the new reporting requirements as much larger financial institutions. Incidentally, this is why when government comes along and they are talking about new burdensome regulations, some of the massive corporations that are impacted oftentimes will be supportive of it because they can bear the burden, but their smaller competition gets crushed under it. And so it is a way, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and these regulatory approaches by government, oftentimes they see that as a win, the big, massive corporations, because it eliminates their smaller competition, and then they can eat up little by little those parts of the marketplace. So the cost of compliance, the CEO at the time argued, was disproportionately higher for regional banks than the global firms with legions more staff. Trump signed the Economic Growth, Regulatory Relief, and Consumer Protection Act in 2018 to exclude regional banks from the toughest requirements in Dodd-Frank, the reforms that followed the financial crisis. The government would only consider banks too big to fail and thus subject to the requirement if they had more than $250 billion on the books, up from the existing $50 billion threshold. Critics say regulators may have caught SVB's vulnerabilities sooner if the bank had had to perform the battery of stress tests required of larger banks, which involved creating detailed forecasts of what a bank's performance would look like under a wide range of scenarios in the economy. Larger banks are also required to keep more cash on hand than smaller ones since the rules were rolled back, but it is not clear that SVB would have avoided ruin if the pre-2018 rules had remained in place. In the end, SVB was done in by a bank run, which is a product of human behavior and emotions. Some analysts have speculated that the uniquely plugged-in nature of SVB's clientele, coming mostly from tech and venture capitalist firms that closely track the financial industry, contributed to the speed of the run on deposits last week. And the long-term security investment that the bank made are usually considered low risk. At the time the bank made them, it was flush with more cash than it could reasonably hand out through potentially riskier loans, and it's unclear whether regulators would have even discouraged those investments if they had been updated more routinely on the bank's decisions. Still, the collapse has renewed calls for the more regulations of banks of the same size and importance as SVB, and if the situation causes a ripple effect of financial turmoil, those calls could gain bipartisan support. And then finally, did Peter Thiel play a role? Tech mogul and Republican donor Peter Thiel came under scrutiny this week after critics questioned whether his decision on Thursday to pull his money out of SVB sparked the bank run that closed the doors. Thiel's venture capitalist firm withdrew its money from SVB on Thursday morning and soon advised companies within its portfolio to retrieve their cash from the bank. Thiel's fame and influence in the investment world have led to speculation about whether other SVB customers followed his lead and emptied their accounts Thursday and Friday, triggering the run. But bank runs are difficult to predict and contain. They occur based on the expectations and concerns of many people, and it would be nearly impossible to determine how many SVB clients base their decision on Thiel. In addition, SVB was in a position to be gutted by a bank run because of its own decisions and some factors that were out of its control, such as rising interest rates. So even if Thiel had sparked a run on deposits, that might not have been fatal unless SVB was already weak. Still, some critics have suggested Thiel had a moral obligation to maintain ties with the bank as the depth of its troubles became clear last week, how much the bank had helped Thiel's industry in ways traditional banks refused to do so. To me, the foundation on which this was built was the inflation caused by the printing of money combined with the Fed's attempt to minimize the damage of all of the printing of money and spending by way of inflation, by raising interest rates. That foundation laid the groundwork for that massive influx of money that they in turn put into areas that traditionally are low risk, but because of the interest rates then going up, combined with not just Thiel, but the notation there that the types of people that had their money in this bank are the types of people that are every day looking at things and perhaps a little more trigger happy to pull money out, that it was a combination of all of those factors in there that probably caused this to occur. But if it were not for, I think arguably, if it weren't for the inflation followed by, the inflation followed by the interest rates hike, I don't believe any of this would have happened. And that, on a large scale, is ultimately the results of the current policies that are in place in the Biden administration. Not that there weren't spending issues before. This is one area that Trump did not fulfill a commitment, and he may argue that that's what the second term would be about, but it was reining in spending, and I understand that with the COVID situation, there were these anomalies that many people felt as if that warranted an alteration of those economic plans. That being said, once Democrats got in control, they were bound and determined to outdo Trump 1,000 times over when it came to spending, which of course is what resulted in the inflation. Despite Biden's claims a couple of weeks ago that he inherited the inflationary levels were 1.2, 1.3% under Trump. They were 1 point something when Trump was president. And you will have a lagging impact, but you can't argue that Trump's increased spending caused inflation, but doing it tenfold, coming in and saying, oh, you think that you know how to spend, you just wait, but the subsequent greater amount of printing and spending didn't cause inflation. You can't make that claim. You cannot have it both ways. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. American Transmissions talk and text line 447-KSGO. Cringe ads go viral from failed bank that refused Trump's business. A circus, not a bank. Now, this is the Signature Bank in New York. And they evidently spend a great deal of time and resources making videos that they were virtue signaling and is a combination of trying to be cool and relevant to a younger audience while virtue signaling. They would take songs, a Katy Perry song, for instance, in one of the videos, and rewrote the words to talk about how awesome they were as a bank and how they were the bank that was actually looking out for their clients' money, while the big banks, all they cared about was profit. And as you can imagine, this is not, as they say, aging well, given the circumstances that they find themselves in at this point. This Signature Bank is also known because they refused then President Donald Trump's business in 2021, because he's such a bad, nasty man. The Signature Bank put out one particular ad featuring a parody of the song Some Nights by Fun that attracted upwards of 735,000 views in a matter of hours. Grit Capital founder Genevieve Rock Decker captioned the video as it's surprising that Signature Bank failed. Their executive team spent millions of dollars to produce music videos and TV shows about themselves. Adding, try not to cringe as you watch this, and it is pretty cringe-worthy. CNBC reported that Signature Bank was deeply invested in volatile cryptocurrency and had $110.4 billion in total assets and $88.6 billion in total deposits at the end of 2022. After Sunday's move by state regulators, the FDIC took control of the bank. In the same Twitter feed, Roche Decker said a former Signature Bank employee told her. Now, this is, to me, the best description of what goes on in a lot of these businesses, in this instance, a financial institution, that focus on wokeness. The former Signature Bank employee told her, quote, "The management team was basically like the show The Office. They'd waste money on things like producing parody videos." The finance expert posted another video from the New York lender, this time a sort of musical comedy sketch, noting who would have trusted their money to these guys after watching this video. This is a circus, not a bank. The Washington Examiner piece noted that if wokeness is a factor in any of these situations, it's not a sole factor. I believe that anytime you have people who are in a leadership position and their top priority is not, and if we're going to talk financial here, getting the best return possible for their clients, then you increase the likelihood things are going to go poorly. Does it mean that they will every time? No. Does it mean that when things do go poorly, that was the one single silver bullet that did it? No. But it could be, and it certainly is a contributing factor, because whether it's wokeness or anything else, if you have people at the top that are running a financial institution and they spend a disproportionate amount of time making videos that don't have anything to do with wokeness but have to do with sports. They're just into sports. They're constantly, or to go back to The Office, when Jim went to another branch and they spent a lot of the time playing Call of Duty instead of focusing on selling paper and paper products. When you take your eye off the ball and you prioritize other things, whatever they may be, wokeness, sports, crafting, you increase the likelihood that the best decisions possible are not being made. And this isn't to say that you have to run some sort of Nazi labor camp and that you don't have fun. I think that is something that oftentimes is associated with a healthy workplace, that you have fun. But when you are spending millions of dollars, and Lord knows how many, I'm telling you, some of these videos, it had to take a very long time to make because they look very professionally produced. I don't know, the voices in the song parodies that they did they sound like they're professional voices. So I'm not sure if they paid voice actors and singers to voice over some of their own employees, or if maybe these were actors that were portraying I don't know, but it's clear this was very significant to them, making parody videos for their own enjoyment and amusement, virtue signaling how much better they were than everybody else. That clearly was a priority to them. And when you have people like that in charge, I can't help but believe you are going to increase the likelihood that you do not succeed, as well as people in charge who focus 100% on the client getting the best return possible. Whether this is a 100% responsible, 50%, or 10%. Sometimes if you're right there on the very edge and you have people, and that's why the employee that said it's like The Office, and Michael Scott's in charge, and while they're talking about bankruptcy, they're talking about closing branches, Michael Scott is more interested in making parody videos, and that's what this employee of Signature Bank said is going on at that bank. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Sarah Myers.
Thank you. Beatles Property Maintenance. First things first, Beatles is spelled Beadles. And what do they do? Well, and who are they? Well, Beatles Property Maintenance, they are locally owned, family owned, and they've been serving our community for over a decade now. So what do? Well, they provide a variety of high-quality property maintenance and repair services. They do things like mold remediation, crawl space repairs, real estate services. So if you are in that process of selling your home, you need a good company. They can help you out with that. If you've had any leaks, they can help with water restoration, plus so much more. So if you find yourself with a home repair that just pops up unexpectedly and you're looking for a very good professional company, I highly recommend my friends over at Beatles Property Maintenance. They've done a lot of things around my house, from doing my kitchen floor to doing some electrical work, and I just keep having them back, and it's because they are awesome at what they do. So if you find yourself looking for a great home repair company, Beatles Property Maintenance is who I trust. Now you can find all of the contact information for Bruce and the Beatles Property Maintenance team at ksgf.com under the Sarah's Endorsements tab.
Immediately after President Joe Biden accidentally revealed a previously unknown detail about former President Jimmy Carter's health towards the end of a speech Monday night before admitting, quote, or that he, quote, should not have said that. Carter's health is waning, placed in hospice care. According to Biden, instructed him to deliver his eulogy. Quote, he asked me to do his eulogy. Excuse me, I shouldn't have said that. Well, it's just shocking for Joe Biden to make the final days of Jimmy Carter about him. This is not surprising. I don't believe that Jimmy Carter did ask. He may have. I believe that it's traditional that the current president, but I could be wrong on that. This is classic Joe Biden behavior. News in 60 seconds. Springfield's Talk 1041. I am Nick Reed. Welcome to the show, everyone. On Facebook Live, YouTube, streaming KSGF.com, the KSGF app, anywhere and everywhere you could possibly imagine. And we are going to have a look at the weather here. It's a cold day. It's going to get warmer, at least through part of the week. Jason Rima will have the latest news, and then we're going to chat with Dr. M, who is in studio with us, as she was so instrumental sometime back getting us information about things that were going on in the Springfield Public School District. And one of the benefits of this sort of format is you don't really have to worry about editing, somebody else editing your words. And so it allows for, I think, much more honest and authentic conversation. Very grateful that she comes on and does provide the information that she does. And as always, I should preface this by saying you are here as a mom, a citizen, not in a official capacity as a school board member.
Yes.
Certainly not vice president of the school board.
Certainly not.
So we'll get things going with her in moments. Jason Ryman now with the latest news. First alert forecast, sunny 48 for the high today, clear 31 tonight. Wednesday, cloudy, a high of 60, 62 on Thursday, and mostly sunny Friday with a high of 40. And I want to go ahead and jump to traffic so that we don't have to break up the conversation so much with Dr. M, who is going to be joining us for the next several Tuesdays, get us updated on things that have been going on in the school district, the some of the positive things, some of the not so positive things, as the people within the Springfield School District are going to be once again casting their vote to determine the direction that things will be going for the children in the public school system in Springfield. So we'll have that here in mere moments, about 2 minutes after traffic. I'm Nick Reed. School board elections coming up. I want to also remind people that there's oftentimes confusion, understandably so. You think, well, I don't live in the city limits of Springfield. That means I cannot vote for Springfield School Board. Look on your tax statement, the end of the year tax statement, or your voter registration card. That tells you what school district that you vote in. You can be in one town but be in another school district, and that was brought to my attention by a voter last time around, and so we went to great effort to make sure people were informed, and I think there were a lot of people, well, I know there were, that just had no idea. People that are very active and very involved. Dr. M is with us. I appreciate you coming and being with us, and I think it was right before we headed off to Mexico, and I mean, it like clockwork, these people, and it's just, when you understand how things work behind the scenes, it's just so transparent, and this coordinated effort amongst the elites and their attack on you, which my interpretation of that was fear. They feared with the election coming up, you saw something you were not supposed to see. And their fear was that people would learn about that. People would learn that there are certain areas of indoctrination that are going on in the school system that aren't getting better, they're getting worse. And they were very, very concerned that that might harm their efforts to keep their clause, if you will, in the school district. And so this coordinated effort with the news leader and these letters. Tell us, if you will, the background of this. Some people who are listening know what I'm talking about, others do not. So if you would explain all of this, how this played out.
So go back to what happened and
yes.
what the brouhaha was
yes,
about.
Yes, if you would.
Oh, I did this at the board meeting, so I'll give you a quick recap. I attended the Youth Empowerment Summit, which is supposed to be for all youth, but it's really for our Black students and our minority students, because that's how it was designed. And most of the students, the vast majority, were African American. There were other students, and I wasn't really particularly paying attention to that, but I decided to attend because I just happened to have the opportunity. I knew it was happening. I'd seen the flyers on the wall of one school that I had visited, so it fit with my schedule. I gave the coordinator, or whoever's name and phone number was on the flyer, and told him, hey, I was going to come, and where was it? So, because I didn't know where it was. The students were bused to this event, right? The information wasn't on the flyer. So I went, and the topic for the morning session was Black Excellence. That was interesting. It was presented by the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion professor at MSU, the diversity, I'm trying to remember what her title was, at Drury University. She was a lovely lady. And diversity chair, I believe, okay. And also the new DI person for the city. Now, he was an interesting character. More on that later, a different day. And listen to that. Afterwards, the students broke up into sessions based on their grade level. So you got the freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors. I poked my head into, I really, I did have another pressing engagement, but I had a few minutes, so I poked my head into the freshman classroom and thought that was interesting. And on my way to the elevator, I saw that there was the senior classroom, and I just sort of peeked in, and they were discussing brain trauma, the trauma brain, like the PTSD brain, the brain that can't process trauma and what happens to it, and sort of think about it PTSD. But I thought it was interesting because there was the LGBTQ flag symbol alongside the slide, and I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. And then the very next slide was racial trauma. I thought, oh, well, that was a quick transition. And the topic of the session was positive brain health. And so I really thought I was going to hear about getting good sleep. It's important. The young are
finding the good in things.
Yes, they're always on their phones.
On
they're always on social media. The importance of getting out there, the sunlight, good nutrition, good sleep. It's just all the things we know. We do have an epidemic of anxiety and depression. So certainly a topic that is very important, very vital. And these are seniors, right? These are kids who in 5 months are going to graduate. So I just decided, oh, this is interesting. I want to hear a little bit about this. So I moved into the back of the room. There were 2 doors. And when I was not long after I entered, the presenter, the moderator, who at the time I thought was a mental health professional, and I'm not really sure that she is, but I do know that she is a director or is part of the diversity, equity, inclusion team at Burrell Behavioral Health. And she asked the students to close their eyes and then to raise their hand if they were experiencing this type of trauma that she was discussing, which was racial trauma. And a minority of the students, I'd say about 20%, maybe 25, roughly 10 kids raised their hands. And then she asked them to put their hands down and open their eyes. And she said that I want you to know that every single person in this room raised their hand because this is real. And Dr. Thomas Tate, who was also in the room, actually interrupted and said, hey, can I ask a question? And she said, well, sure. And the question was, can this be experienced secondhand? And, absolutely. Well, can it be experienced through video? Oh, yeah, video exposure. So they were talking about that. And I was at the back of the room, so it took a little bit to get to me, but I had my hand raised and I was patiently waiting. And she called on me. She said, yes. And I said, hey, I can't remember my exact words, but just want to let you know that about 10 people raised their hand. And I think she was caught. She was off guard.
Sure.
Because she could have come back in a million different ways, like, oh, well, you're in the back, but from the front, clearly it was everyone. There's many different ways she could have addressed it. But she said, let me see if I can recall here. She said, okay, I'll consider that for the next time. And then she actually admonished me. She said, well, thanks for having your eyes open when everybody else had their eyes closed. Now, you see, I'm an adult in the room. I didn't know the exercise extended to me. And I was disturbed by that. And so, like I said, I had a pressing engagement, but I wanted to contact the superintendent, which is what I did. I left that room and I texted the superintendent, but she didn't text me back. She never called me back.
I suspect there was a lot of other texting going on.
Not at all. Nobody. Oh, you mean not with me?
Outside of
yes.
you.
So what happened is, okay, so I was very surprised. I mean, completely blindsided. And it wasn't so much, I was surprised by the response to the lie, right? They got caught and nobody was particularly interested in, nobody apologized. Nobody was particularly embarrassed. Nobody wanted to say, hey, so what really happened or what's going on? Nobody wanted to have a conversation about it, right? Because that's what liars do. They double down when they lie. And it was, shut up, you asked too many questions, disruptor, interrupter, your tone, it's the usual. It's
Well, and I'll say it.
It brought to light what has been happening privately on the public stage.
Part of what was so disturbing to me, and I talked about this last week, is, of course, you had this letter that was written, and you've got president of MSU and the head of Burrell Health and
NAACP.
NAACP, and no one is denying that the entire premise of this exchange with the kids was a lie, and that they were lied to. Nobody disputed, even during the school board meeting.
During the school board meeting, it was okay because the children didn't mind.
And this is my number.
This was said very clearly. That yes, maybe it was most of the people. Well, that's as far as they will go. They won't say every single. Well, maybe she said most of the people, but the kids didn't mind. What they minded was my quote unquote interruption of their and a violation of their safe spaces. And my heart just when I read these letters that these kids have written, it's so incredibly sad.
I don't know how it is that what sort of culture are you cultivating in a school district where the message that the children are getting is that you can be lied to by adults, people you're supposed to trust. And when that occurs, the person who says, hey, this isn't right, probably shouldn't be lying to the students, that person is attacked by the head of MSU, Burrell Health, NAACP, other members on the school board. how do you expect kids in that environment to be honest? How can you tell kids it's wrong to cheat when it comes to academics, when you are being just bombarded with this message of it's okay to lie and almost
Yeah.
virtuous?
Almost, how do you help students? Because that's the business we're in, right? If you're not going to tell them the truth. And it's so disturbing. And somebody important said this, and I don't know whose words these are, but when you want to help somebody, you tell them the truth. But when you want to help yourself, you tell them what they want to hear. They are trying to help themselves. And I felt it was particularly egregious because it was done during this mental health guise,
Right.
which is even more, I mean, it's so invasive. I mean, it's just outright manipulation.
Right.
And they've been doing it for years. When you look at the letters that these students wrote to us, mind you, some of them were handwritten. And I think we need to get back to the drawing
Right.
board and talk about punctuation and complete sentences.
Well, and this is another aspect of this, aside from the divisive and damaging component to it, the fact that it's just off the mark anyhow. It would be one thing if you were talking about kids that were just excelling, that you had a situation in which you realize we're firing on all cylinders. Everyone is looking to how we're doing things. Every year we see improvement. But that's not going on. Things are getting worse. And the basics like punctuation, when you it angers me and it does make me feel sad. These kids are being screwed over. They're being screwed over. This is
Absolutely.
the trajectory that for many of them will not get off this trajectory. And it's funny because the people who oftentimes tout how this is the formative years and what we do with them now is going to have an impact on the rest of their lives are the ones that are denying them an actual education and instead are making them believe that they're victims that must be reliant on somebody taking care of them. It's just a horrible thing. Dr. Enwith is going to take a break and then we'll talk some more about, well, all of this, I suppose, as we continue on. I'm Nick Reed. Talking with Dr. M, who is not here in her official capacity as a Springfield School Board member, but able to give us great insight that otherwise we would not be afforded. The problem that I have recognized for a very long time with school boards is the upside down perspective. The folks who oftentimes are recruited to run are recruited by the people who should ultimately be taking the direction from those people. Like the hiring process here is upside down. School board should be members of the community that, while of course they listen to and they want to get information as best as possible from those that are hired in order to hopefully give our children a better education. When it comes down to it, the school board members are, if you will, the boss of those very people. But what I have noted over time is that school board members oftentimes believe, no, they're our boss. Our job is to be told by the superintendent, by these different administrators, what they need, and then we are then to tell the community this is what the school district needs. It's totally upside down, and you can see it in the people. You've got up until recently there was, and I should note that academia, it's all one big bubble here. Up until recently, there was somebody from Drury. There's still somebody now running for re-election who is from MSU. You have a former principal from the school district that's running for the first time in the school board. And that, I don't believe, is healthy. And I know some people say, but they have background, they have expertise. If you are a school board member like you, who's a parent, you have access to all of those people. There is no lack of voice to give you insight. It's not necessary to then, in addition, double down and also have that echo chamber be on the board, in my assessment. I wanted to get your thoughts on it.
I completely agree with you because we are constantly told, don't get into the weeds, don't get into the weeds, which I agree with. But if you don't want somebody to get into the weeds of education, then what's the big deal about having education folks on the board? It doesn't, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. And I don't think there's a lot of value in having people who have a strong educational background on the board. And I'll tell you why. Because we have the strong educator in the room. That would be the superintendent and the cabinet. So we, like you said, we have access, and they're the ones who drive the bus. And we are the body that supports and oversees, right? Holds them accountable. And these are elected seats. The problem with having educators, especially when they come out of K-12, is that they have spent an entire career having the superintendent or the cabinet be their boss.
Right.
And so it is very difficult to ask. There's just this inherent conflict, right, of interest. It is hard for them to put on the hat where they are now the people who are essentially the boss of the superintendent. That's difficult. It's a difficult transition. See where I'm going with that?
Yes.
2, I wish we did, if we were going to have an educator, I wish it were a teacher in the trenches who just retired and decided, okay, well, I want to go on the school board. But it's not. It never has been. It's always the ones who leave, who then move on to go into administration. Our current board president was somebody who moved into administration and then again moved into MSU, sort of like one of the candidates running right now, Judy Bruner, and then they come back and want to run for the board. And by then they've morphed into not the acclaimed, incredible educator that they were. It's almost like they've, I don't know, it's like they undergo their own little indoctrination, which is, it's a slow march towards something that's almost unrecognizable. And my problem is, so then they become administrators and they're running the show, right? They're way removed from the teacher they were, or even the building principal they were. And you're asking now people who are part of the broken system, and it is broken, to now come and fix it. And I don't think people realize this. And I do want to brag a little bit about some of the good that has happened and some of the ways we'll get to that. Let's promise we get back to how we are moving the needle. But I think people don't realize how great Springfield Public Schools was. I mean, we were known within the state because we've always had a high poverty level, right? We've always had sitting at that 50% or higher free and reduced lunch rates for our students, which is an indicator of the poverty level. But we've always been very large. And, as most large things go, they don't function always as efficiently or effectively. People would come from around the state and say, how do you do it? How are you doing this well with the money you have and the at-risk population you have and the large number of students you have? And so we weren't always failing. So we did it right before. It's not hard. This isn't rocket science, right? We're not reinventing the wheel. But something's happened in the last decade, at least, probably 2 decades. So when somebody says, hey, I've been part of the system for the last 2 or 3 decades, it doesn't really
That's
inspire
not a selling point to me. I know.
Right, it doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. So, and I think it does take an outsider to see what's at stake. If we have time, I do want to. We received a letter.
Well, here, let's get a traffic update, and then we'll go on to that with Dr. M. We're talking about the Springfield Public School District this morning on Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. First alert forecast, sunny 48 today, 31 for a low tonight, tomorrow 60, 62 on Thursday with some rain, and then colder. Friday mostly sunny, a high of 40. Dr. M with us, enlightening us, providing information as to what has been going on with the Springfield public school system. And we have another, and the last school board election to me, it was a signal. Are the people of Springfield wanting to continue down a path of failed results, diminishing results for young people, or do we want to go back to focusing on meaningful results for the kids? And at least by way of that last election, the people said we need to go in a different direction. I don't want to be one of those people that says every time a new election comes along, well, this is the most important one, but I don't think I can stress enough, and I want to get your thoughts on this. This is so much about the, to use the term, establishment versus the rest of us who are like, we have to stop failing. We cannot continue to let the people who have failed the kids over, and by their own admission oftentimes. I've been shocked to hear some of them almost dismissively say, well, we know that the test scores are down, but, and then just move on to something else as if that's incidental, as opposed to what should be the sole priority. Your thoughts?
Exactly. And this idea that, well, everybody else is failing.
Yeah.
The rest of the country's failing, the rest of the state, and COVID, and okay, sure, but we're failing more.
Right.
Right? Our numbers are worse. And I just don't buy it. And I absolutely agree with you. This is about the establishment who has been doing things a certain way for so long, and they like it just so, versus the people who want to have a say in their schools and in their city and in their community because they're paying the taxes. And we have a lot of money. And there's absolutely no excuse. So it is the establishment. I was saying right before we took a break that we received a letter most recently.
Is it we, the school board?
The school board, right. So each school board member. So we all receive it because it is addressed to all of us from a past school board member. This is Jill Patterson, and she writes, it is a long letter, but let me read you parts of it, that she's confident that while she and her fellow board members did not agree on all political issues, I know for sure because the issues of politics and national agendas did not enter the boardroom. So this is the thing. When people talk about this, they're usually the ones who did it. I'm not a very political person. Politics have not entered and are not at all a consideration of the way that I approach my votes, the direction I've taken. But this is exactly what they did. They went down the national agenda. I mean, whose idea was it? Oh, let's get rid of all the books and just buy a bunch of computers. Right. Well, that was a national narrative. It started on the West Coast and it made it this way, right? Whose idea was it to get all the teachers in a room and tell them they're all a bunch of white racists? Right. That was a national political narrative. So I don't really, and usually when the people are yelling something, they're the ones doing it, right? We know that. And so then she goes on to say that the job of the board, this is important, is, at least she saw her job, is to oversee the SPS budget, to ensure taxpayer monies were spent responsibly, and to enhance effective school programs and to support the work of the district to the betterment of staff, students, and our community. And she stands strong in her conviction that her job was to not to supplant the judgment, but to support the teachers and staff. So this, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I had a voicemail from a person who was a school, or maybe still is a school board member, noting that when somebody gets newly elected, there's training. Does DESE put this on?
Well, no, the state has, by law, you have to have a certain number of hours of training, and currently the only establishment that offers it is Missouri School Board Association.
All right.
So that is very much the narrative, and then that's the dogma, which is you are here to support.
That's
apparently support.
That's what this person
and
said.
so it's the question is, what does support mean? Does support, according to SPS, and I've been told this repeatedly in private and now in public, which is support is you show up, you smile.
Rubber stamp.
And you vote yes. Yeah. Literally, your job is to show up and shake hands. What are you doing? And so they don't want questions of any type. And so Jill Patterson continues to write, it's all about this attack on public education, that some candidates for the board are decidedly political, certainly unprofessional, and unsupportive of SPS administration. And that their purpose, including some current board members, so that would be me, and some candidates, is to destroy the public systems of our country. Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. This destruction of public systems. Because if I recall, I'm the only one who went to Jeff City and testified for public schools to get help for public schools. That's something we can talk about maybe at a later time. I don't see them doing anything or caring. Their idea of supporting public schools is showing up, smiling, shaking hands, and voting yes, but not really doing anything substantive. And so asking questions and trying to understand what it is that we're doing wrong and how we can improve that. How can we funnel our money in such a way that it is more effective? That is seen as attacking public schools. So holding public schools accountable so that we can help our students and that we can have a future that we can all look forward to, right? It's not just the students, but it's our collective future. It's our community. That is seen as being an attack. And this letter, and I'll finish it off, and she finishes off by saying that she wanted to thank the courage of the Ford board members because they stand firm against personal agendas, unprofessional antics, which, is their personal agendas and their own unprofessional antics, and support of national political agendas, determined to tear down public schools. They want to focus on maintaining a professional, unpartisan board that is so. What this letter says, that we are united in our status quo. We are united, and when you look at who is funding these campaigns of these candidates, you see. I read in the news leader that we had 6 or so school board members, like just immediate past school board members, funding the campaigns of Judy Bruner, who is an establishment candidate. Yeah. And you should wonder if this Jill Patterson was the president and vice president. She was in a leadership role for some of the years that she was on the board. A highly intelligent woman, a very, very good person, has done so much good for our community, both in her professional role and at her role at MSU. And, but somehow they've been brought into this fold, this idea that if you question anything, that if you try to make any improvements, that if you try to get us back in our lane and to try to move it in a positive direction, that's an attack on public education. To even point to the bad scores is an attack on public education. And that's disheartening. Do you know what I mean? And so to me, this election isn't more about, I don't have a beef with anyone, right? And this is a really simple question posed to the people. Do you want things to just be the way they are, which is we like it just as it is, and you shut up and go away? Or do you want to solve the problems? I mean, do you want somebody who's never going to question anything and who's part of the establishment? Or do you want something different? It's really simple, right? It's not political in any way.
I believe it's simple if your vision and understanding of what the school system is about kids getting a proper education. These positions that we hear from the establishment highlights the difference in understanding as to what the districts are supposed to be. It's almost a social experiment, oftentimes, I believe, for a lot of the establishment candidates, because it should be clear that wanting better results for the students is supporting a district, not attacking it. That is, if that is your understanding of the district's purpose.
Right. I mean, I support my children. You support your child. How do we support them? Do we just show up every day at breakfast and clap? Do we clap for them and say, yay, no matter what you do, I'm going to support you? You can go out there and get a DUI and I'm all for it. Right. No, I love my children. And I hold them accountable. Right. That's how I express my love and support, through accountability.
And I think the establishment, they, as you've noted, somewhere lost track. And it's almost about creating this utopia of sorts that isn't about results. It's about creating what they feel is an atmosphere in which everybody is equitable, and I don't even know.
Collegial. Everything
yeah,
has to be nice and pretty and clean. But let me tell you, it's messy. Fixing things, if you've ever taken a car
Oh,
apart
yeah.
or anything, take your Lego
Right.
set apart and put it back together, it's messy. And it's frustrating.
You just want to
And it-
because I think some of these people may be, or they originated as well-intended people, but you just want to shake them and say, "What is your goal here?"
Yeah, they're very well intended. These people have the best of intentions. It's,
We're going to traffic update more with Dr. M as we talk about the current state of affairs with the Springfield public school system. I'm Nick Reed, Springfield's Talk 1041. Springfield Public Schools, chatting with Dr. M, not in her capacity as a school board member, but someone who has that insight, of course.
I have to
Continue
brag a
on.
little. I want to brag a little
Yes.
before we continue on. So I don't know if you're aware, but one of the things I ran on my campaign was a more responsible attitude towards technology and
I
the
do remember that being
distractions
very important.
and also books, printed material. I know I was called the book banner, but I just really wanted to bring the books back into the
Right.
schools. Really, kind of very ironic. So I do want to say that beginning next year, so this year in K-5, the Chromebooks were not going home with the students. So they were indeed being used as an educational tool because they stayed in the classroom. Next year, it will extend up through 8th grade. So I think that's really fantastic news. In addition, we are purchasing books, K-12 social studies and K-5 science. And it's a tune of over $2 million, $2.5 million. So that is a very, very good investment. And speaking of books, and this goes back to the dysfunction of the board and how the board can be more instrumental. I'm by no means taking credit for all of this. This is the work of the superintendent. But I do take credit for the input that we all give, each individual person, and the community gives. So when I was first elected to the board, we try to get to know the other board members. And I went for coffee or what have you with Dr. Thomas Tate. And I told her that one of my passions was bringing the books back into the classroom and in front of the kids. And she agreed with me. And so did Dr. Taylor, mind you, except he didn't help in that regard. Fantastic fellow, but just didn't pan out. He was weak when it came to really standing up for the kids and really pushing and asking and being that thorn in the side of the district, saying, hey, this is what the community needs and wants, and this is what they're telling me. Well, Dr. Thomas Tate said, I completely agree, because she's all about literacy, and I knew she would be an ally in this. I thought, okay, I got some like-minded people who know what it takes to educate kids. But I was so disappointed because she said to me, and I will never forget these words, she said, I agree with you, but that will come in time. Because first we have to teach the teachers how to teach. And I said, well, why can't we get books at the same time? Like, I didn't even
Right.
understand what she was talking about. And I think now I understand what she was talking about.
Because there are children that need, so you're missing
Yeah.
kids.
And
These
she
are,
said she put a time, because I asked her, what's the timeline? You want to take a guess what her timeline was for bringing books back? 3 years. She said, we'll do that in 3 years. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, what are we going to do? What are we
Right,
going to
in
do
the
for
meantime.
in the meantime? And so only took 2 years, right, from when that was my mission. So I shaved a year off, and it was an uphill battle every stage of the way, every question.
you know, it's
Was
what once upon a time, whenever a school was lobbying the public for more funding, if they oftentimes weren't going, or they would say, if we don't get this, we're going to have to cut out books. That was seen as something that was so understood as instrumental to a child's education. Oftentimes it would be used as kind of a scare
Right,
tactic.
as a
Well,
scare
they would tell sports, the things that people really love and appreciate. But now it's, we'll get them in 3 years.
And yeah, and the funny part is everyone's so like, yay, we're going to have books back. And, and I've had some people reach out and say thanks. And what are you thanking me for? This is like basic. This
It
isn't
should
brain
be.
surgery, people. Like this, I'm sorry, you really don't need to have an MD to have figured this one out, right?
Yeah.
Any pop and mom could have told you that. And speaking of books, I don't know if I've ever really shared this story, but Dr. Bruner, or Mrs. Bruner, she's not a doctor, Judy Bruner was our principal, and she was co-principal at Central High School when I had 2 kids there. And my daughter was in 7th grade. And incidentally, she was co-principal with a lovely gentleman by the name of Stephen Seal. Is it okay to tell some stories?
Sure, yes.
Okay, so we loved Mr. Seal because we knew him previously from a different school.
And I should, we've had like 3 minutes left,
Oh,
just so you know.
But for like the entire
Yes,
session.
yes.
Like I'm not coming back.
No, you will come back, but
Well, all right.
not for this show.
So Mr. Seal, I went to Mr. Seal. My daughter wasn't doing well in algebra, and she was in 7th grade. And I said, we really need a book because we really want to help her. And he says, well, sure, follow me. Come to school. I'll get you a book. And he's like, I'm going to go to the book closet. And there's a room with books in it. Lovely, lovely man. And 2 weeks later, he came to the conclusion that there are no books. So this fell into Judy Bruner's lap because I wasn't going to stop complaining. And, there's a lot of...
Lucky her.
There's a lot of ways she could have handled it. It could have been like, hey, we don't have books, and I'm really sorry, but it is what it is, and this is the system. I'm just a part-time principal. I came out of retirement, and I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart. But I agree with you, but that's not what she said, and she wasn't supportive in that way. Eventually, we put a panel of people together on a Zoom meeting. This is during COVID, where we have the director of curriculum and her and the teacher and all these sorts of people. And I'm just trying to find out why it is that my daughter's being told to go on Collins Academy because the teacher wouldn't talk to her, wouldn't teach her, because that was the new curriculum. That was one of my beefs that I had with the system was this terrible math curriculum, which was student taught. The students taught each other, and then they went online. And there was no book for the parents to help. And at one point I asked questions, because I asked questions. I said, hey, listen, in medicine, when something goes wrong, it lands at someone's feet. I don't understand the chain of command in education. So when this new curriculum is deemed to be a failure, kind of like who loses their job?
Right.
Like where does the buck stop, right? And at that moment, the person who I think the buck stopped with or what have you, in my view, it should have, I had my building principal there to be my support, right? That was the person that was advocating for my child amongst all these administrators and said that my question was, it was too offensive. And they didn't understand it. And I said, well, in my tone, I was just the way I'm asking right now, like, hey, this is just a question I have. Like, what are the consequences? What happens when you make these decisions? And Judy
when you fail the kids.
Right. And Judy Bruner at that point said, well, I think our time is up. And that was it. That was the end. And incidentally, I went to the counselor on the way to this meeting. And this is somebody who's now fully on board with Judy Bruner. This counselor, who was a lovely counselor at one point and really helped my older child, said to me, I said, I have a real problem. My daughter can't write anymore because she's not being asked to write. She's always on the computer. She physically cannot write cursive anymore. And she said, well, that's okay. You shouldn't be worried. The only thing she needs to know how to write is her name. Can she sign her name? You're fine. And then when I said, well, her teacher won't talk to her, and she said, well, we love your daughter. She's a bright little girl. But you see, she's an auditory learner. But we're not worried about her because we know her. We've had her tested. We think she's going to do just fine. She will learn to become a visual learner because that's the world now. She's going to have to learn how to learn from a screen. But don't you worry, pat on the back. Don't you worry. We're going to get her there. And so this is the counselor under Judy Bruner. And I'm not saying that my problem is this is the go along, get along. There was no recognition of we're failing your child.
Right.
It was, well, this is how things are.
Right.
And it's perfectly fine. And you're going to have to figure out a way to work around it.
Thank you.
You're
again.
so welcome.
And then we look forward to, at the very least, talking to you this time next week. Dr. M, thank you so much. It's always very insightful every time
You're
that you
very
join
welcome.
us.
Look forward to our next talk.
Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Garage experts for all of your garage needs. I love my garage. That is not something you traditionally hear people say unless they are. I always thought, if you were really, really, really wealthy and you had all of these just antique cars, these really fancy cars, and it was a showroom floor. But with garage experts, you can love your garage. I do. Customize cabinets, customize storage based on my usage, not just based on the space. Customize, what really matters is how do you use your garage? Do you do some electrical work in there? Do you do a lot of gardening where you need the benches and just accommodating storage for that? Do you not do much there at all? Do you just use Christmas items to store away? Is that what it's for? That's what they custom design based off of. It's your usage, and then of course the highest quality epoxy flooring you can find, hundreds and hundreds of colors. The flaking, by the way, some of the do-it-yourself stuff, the flakes are very, very far and few between. The amount of flakes that are used, if you've ever done this before, you know what I'm talking about. It's a tremendously greater quality and quantity than you can oftentimes get when it comes to the DIY, not to mention the process of it. I just recommend that you watch my transformation video on our Facebook page, 1041 Nick Reed, and then you talk with Mark, you talk with Shelly about what the process is like for your garage with garage experts under Nick's endorsements, ksgf.com. We are going to periodically between now and school board elections be talking about particularly Springfield. We can't cover every school board. It's just time. And we're not going to talk about it every day because, let's be honest, at some point you have a law of diminishing return when it comes to interest and attention. And oftentimes if you focus on one thing too much, people tune out, and then it can do more harm than good. And we don't want that because it is very important. And the Springfield School District is the largest school district in the state. A lot of people don't realize that. How can it be larger than St. Louis and Kansas City? Those school districts are broken up. Springfield is the largest school district in the state of Missouri. And there are 4 individuals that are running for Springfield School Board. And here is what I do know. There are 2 what I would call newcomer citizens in terms of the school board, non-establishment individuals, and there are 2 establishment individuals. One of them, Sharita Thomas Tate, who also is employed by MSU, who's also on the board of the NAACP. It's all this incestuous bubble culture of elites in Springfield. She currently sits on the board. She is running to continue to sit on the board. Then you have Bruner, who is from this system. Part of the problem, if you will. And my take on this, it's not about this person's bad or even and of course we get into some of the specific subject matter and we talk here whether it is locally or nationally, some of the very damaging and divisive instruction that these young people are given. But ultimately, the opportunity that the establishment has had in the Springfield Public School District has resulted in failure for the kids. They do not even deny that the kids, that there has been failure. They acknowledge that there has been a continued decline in the outcome of the education in terms of where the kids are when they graduate. Ultimately, is that not all we need to know? If you take your vehicle to a particular shop to have work done on it, and every time something even worse ends up going wrong with your vehicle, every single time, not only does the problem not get fixed, but there's another one on top of it. At some point, do you not say, listen, I know I'm not a mechanic. I'm not ASE certified. I don't know. I think I could change a tire. But the one thing I know is this is not working. What would you do? You would do what any person would do who wants better results. You would find somebody else. If you are hiring a lawn person to come care for your lawn, and not only does it not get better with treatment, but you have brown spots that are popping up, you have dandelions that are popping up, you've got thistle that's popping up, and so you call them again. Oh yes, we'll take care of it. Trust us. Don't worry. But not only does that not get taken care of, but then even more problems arise. At some point, what do? Even if you're not an expert when it comes to lawn care, what do? You hire somebody else. If you are a patient and your child has an illness, maybe not the most serious illness in the world, but one that is problematic and that has remedies you're aware of because other kids have had these same ailments, and you take your child to the doctor, and the treatment not only doesn't make it better, but it makes it worse. Do you not go at the very least for a second opinion? Because you care about your child? People may say that it's unfair to take the approach that I take at this point when it comes to school boards, and that is, if they are part of the problem, they should not be on the school board. If they have been part of the system that is failing, if they really cared about the kids, they would be the first ones to say, you know what, I'm going to step aside because clearly my presence here is not helping the kids. And that needs to be the number one priority. It doesn't mean that they're bad people. It doesn't mean that they have ill intent. When it comes down to it, should the number one priority not be the results for the kids? I believe it should be. And I don't believe we are at the point where we have the luxury of taking the chance and rolling the dice and saying, well, all right, you've had all of these years in the system and things have continued to fail, but we'll go ahead and give you another shot. We don't have that luxury. I have, on several occasions in discussing this, described it as, we're failing our kids, but we're actually failing all of us, because these are the people that are going to be pilots, that are going to be engineers, that are going to be doctors. These are the people that, some of which, because of a failure to provide the young people a proper education, will end up being a non-productive member of society. This has an impact on every single living person in this community and in this country. So simply seeing it as an issue that is for parents only is not it's not an accurate understanding of what's going on in the landscape here. Jason Ryman with the latest news update. First alert forecast, sunny, 48 for a high today, clear 31 tonight, cloudy 60 tomorrow, Thursday rain with a high of 62, colder on Friday, sunny though, a high of only 40. I alluded in the last discussion just moments ago about results. Let's just look at the results. Why is that so difficult? Following that theme, Rice University study. I'm going to share the brief results with you. I'm not going to go into a tremendous amount of detail. I'm not going to bore you, but after we get the traffic update, this is a Rice University study. Trump's policies cut illegal immigration. Biden's encouraged the inflow. Results. Why is it so difficult to look at results? This is where I began to hone where I fall politically, I suppose, if you will. I became very interested in things that were going on in high school. Not sure why. It engaged me. And like a lot of people who first get involved and pay attention, I believe that it's the rhetoric. You attach yourself to people who say they are going to do virtuous things because that's what you like, right? Well, we want to help the economy. And the way to do that is to increase taxes on corporations. And you're like, oh, okay, what do I know? I, though, am interested in results. And it seems as if a significant portion of the population has no interest in that whatsoever. None. No interest. The issue of taxes is just a brilliant one. Lowering taxes increases revenue to the Treasury. Post-Trump tax cuts not only, quote, paid for themselves, but record amounts of revenue came in addition to that. In other words, if you like the government having lots of money, you should be fully supportive of those tax cuts. But what do you have the left still run around claiming? That Trump caused deficits because of the tax cuts. That's not what happened. What is your goal? What is your purpose if you just deny and ignore the true results? You have an administration that still claims, number one, out of one side of their mouth, that the border is secure. But whenever it's obvious and noted that it's not, they say, well, the reason it's not is because Trump left us a broken system, right? Well, what about the results? Of course, we see with our own eyes when you have thousands of illegals literally storming across the border. But aside from that, Rice University study, Trump's policies cut illegal immigration, Biden's encouraged an inflow. Former President Donald Trump's policies at the United States-Mexico border helped deter illegal immigration, while President Joe Biden's policies encourage record-setting inflows, according to the new research project. The study, conducted by Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy, compares the size and scale of migrant caravans under Trump versus those that have arrived under the Biden administration. Trump's policies, which included the Remain in Mexico program, eliminating the catch and release process, and imposing the Title 42 Public Health Authority, served as a deterrent for border crossers and illegal aliens, according to the study. In one particular example, Trump pressured the Mexican government to slow the flow of illegal immigration via Twitter, which ultimately had a deterrent effect. I don't know if you'll recall when this occurred. I recall when it occurred because I swear it was within 48 hours. He got a response out of Mexico. And I recall Nancy Pelosi even acknowledging that, well, yes, it worked, but he used bullying tactics against Mexico, and that's just not right. Trump was known, this is from the study, Trump was also known for the unconventional practice of making policy pronouncements on Twitter, and once tweeted that if Mexico did not stop the caravan movement, 5% or higher tariffs would be imposed on all goods imported from Mexico. In an apparent response to this political pressure, the Mexican government sent military troops and National Guard paramilitary officers to the Guatemalan border to block migrants from entering Mexico. Bam! They responded because they did not want that punishment. All of a sudden, it became a detriment to them as well. Results. The study writes, in this way, an unofficial U.S. policy delivered by tweet resulted in a responsive Mexican immigration enforcement policy. Isn't that amazing? You have, all these summits. And these big important meetings where they all come together and, the president of Mexico stands behind his podium here, and the president of Canada stands behind his podium here, and Trump in a tweet managed to get the Mexican government to dispatch military troops and National Guard paramilitary officers like that. The study noted the combination of these two policies stopped or slowed down the migrants and the caravan from that point on. In addition, the Mexican and Guatemalan governments turned the caravans around, just as international travel ground to halt due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Migrant caravans starting after 2020 rarely made it to the U.S. border. Instead, they usually went through only one country, typically from Honduras to Guatemala, or were blocked in Mexico. The combination of immigration policies and COVID-19 travel restrictions negatively impacted the migrants and to some extent explained the sharp decrease in migrant movement numbers in 2020. Meanwhile, the study found Biden's policies of creating an expansive catch and release network that has released almost 2 million border crossers and illegal aliens into the United States interior since early 2021 has increased illegal immigration. Well, who would have thought? a couple of notations from the study there about the actual results of the Biden immigration policies. We got a traffic update coming first, though. Pyramid Roofing Company needs your help in deciding what's the best or worst or most off-putting thing Joe Biden has ever said. I suppose it just depends on your perspective. We got a bracket, March Madness bracket going on, but they're all Biden quotes. Go to ksgf.com. You hear each quote and then choose. Every week you participate will be an entry for the random drawing. It's $200 in gasoline. You're going to get a gift card, $200 in gas for your car or lawnmower, or whatever you want to use it for. That's at ksgf.com. You know what rhymes with Smemily Smonson? Emily Johnson. House Theory Realty. That's right. Owner, broker, Emily Johnson. All of your home buying, all of your home selling needs. You can read reviews. I've had her. One of the things I really like, having been shown a home by Emily Johnson, is her goal is not just to sell you a house. Got to get it as fast as we can. She will be the first one to say, now, you talked about you wanted this, and this house doesn't really have that. Because sometimes if you're out there and you need a home, or you try to talk yourself into certain things, like, well, I know, we talked about having another kid, but we don't know that we will, so we don't really need that extra bedroom. She's going to be there to remind you, like, now, this is something that you said was important when we first talked about it. So her number one goal is not just to get you into the first home possible, get that commission, but to get you in the home that is best for you. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty, under Nick's endorsements, ksgf.com. First Alert Forecast sponsored by Navant. Employee benefits that work. Sunny, 48 for a high today, 31 tonight. Cloudy, warmer tomorrow, 60, 62 with rain on Thursday. Sunshine on Friday, yet colder with a high of only 40. Saturday, 39. Blah. Talking about, I'm on a results theme today, and fewer and fewer people seem to consider results as important. We're talking about education, and we've got in the Springfield School District here an opportunity with the upcoming school board elections to either continue with one incumbent who is part of the system, another who is running for the first time but has been part of the system in the Springfield Public School District, or two people who haven't been part of the system. And while some, that, yes, means that they are untested. We don't know. But we do know what the current system has given us. Why is it so difficult for us as a people to look at the results and recognize, okay, things are getting worse, so let's not do that anymore. Let's give somebody else a shot. The last segment I brought this up because of a Rice University study that noted in the study that aside from what you believe about ideology, politics aside, Trump's policies cut illegal immigration while Biden's encouraged an inflow of illegal immigrants. Those are the results. And in one instance, they noted that Trump, just with a single tweet, letting the Mexican government know, all right, here's what's going to happen, 5% or higher tariffs if you don't help here. And immediately, they dispatched the military to their southern border to stop a caravan from continuing its way through Mexico to the United States. Meanwhile, the study found Biden's policies created more illegal immigration. The study noted, on the basis of this information, we reached the conclusion that immigration policies that are perceived to be punitive in nature, aka Trump, including the Remain in Mexico policy, ending catch and release, and other Trump-era policies, affected migrant caravans negatively or deterred their formation and movement, while perceived permissive immigration policies, including DAPA and DACA, the ending of Title 42, likely affected migrant caravans positively or spurned their formation and movement. Now, you would not think this would be a difficult thing to figure out. You would not think that it would be a difficult thing to figure out that if you make it more punitive to violate our immigration laws, you will have less people try and do it. On the flip side, if you are more permissive, or hell, if before a world stage during a Democratic debate declare, if I'm elected president, I want all of you who are turned away at the border to come back, that's the sort of thing that's going to result in a higher level of illegal immigration. The media and Democrats disagreed with that assessment, but we have seen from this Rice University study that that's exactly what happened. Some of us call that common sense. The study noted permissive immigration policies in the U.S. tend to convert migrant perceptions into pull factors because of the perception that a particular administration might not be hard on immigration, causing more migrants to cross the border illegally and stay in the U.S. The cost of illegal immigration falls overwhelmingly on American taxpayers. In New York City, they noted taxpayers are footing a daily $5 million bill to house, clothe, and feed newly arrived illegals. And the mayor, of course, recently announcing he wants the taxpayers to fund college for them as well. See, these are, again, things common sense tells you is going to make the problem worse, not better. There's a tremendous amount of frustration out in cities like Portland and San Francisco amongst those who genuinely try and help the homeless. And that is because their attempts to help the homeless, as described in their own words, is get to the root of the problem and work with them so that they are no longer homeless. They are fighting against people on the left who fancy themselves homeless advocates, who instead of taking that route, instead of determining what causes these individuals to be homeless, let's get to the root of the problem, let's work with them to get them out of the circumstances, instead want to make it more comfortable for them to be homeless. Giving them free drugs, giving them tents to live in. And these same brainiacs that make it more comfortable to be homeless scratch their head like, well, we don't understand. We pumped $80 million into solving this problem, and it just keeps getting worse. There's a study that came out that showed, let's see where it is here. The average for the first time in, is it in 100 years, or that the average IQ is diminishing in the United States, and that it is particularly impacting on younger generations. This is of no surprise. To circle back, if you will, to the public education system in this country, where we are seemingly forbidding young people from intellectualism, preventing them on how to think, but instead just sit and be a sponge, a recipient of information that the so-called experts give you. Whether it's telling you that you're a victim or you're a perpetrator, that there are a certain there's certain degree of truths out there that you must just accept. And if you don't accept them, you are part of the problem. When you train people to not critically think of things, when you train people to not ask questions, when you train people that asking questions means you're anti-science, people shut down. Just as you can teach people to be thinkers and intelligent, you can equally teach them to be lemmings that lose the ability to critically think. And that is what is happening in this country. I want to play audio for you coming up. A white college student is asked by Turning Point USA reporter Savannah Hernandez. Now, this student apparently doesn't know anything about Turning Point USA. All he knows is that he is being asked by a Hispanic female about white privilege. The exchange is very instructive as to what it is that the left has done to so many people in this country today, and how damaging it is. That next, I'm Nick Reed. Sarah Myers.
Thank you, thank you. Well,
You're
if
welcome.
you are in the market for a roofing company, I have a name for you, and that is the Pyramid Roofing Company. Now, the Pyramid Roofing Company, they have been providing top-quality roofing in Missouri since 1992, and in fact, during that time, they've put on over 35,000 roofs, which means they might know a thing or two about roofing. Now, as we move into that spring season, you know what spring is famous for? Rain. And rain oftentimes leads to
Flowers.
leaking. Yes, that too. Yes. But it leads to leaking and gutter issues. And if you are a victim of that, highly recommend having the Pyramid Roofing Company come out, do an inspection on your roof. They'll get up there, take tons of photos and videos, and show you exactly what is going on. And maybe you're in a situation where you don't need a whole new roof. Maybe you need just a roof repair. Either way, the Pyramid Roofing Company, they will be upfront and honest with you and let you know, hey, you don't need a whole new roof. You need just a roof repair. Or if you do need a whole new roof, they'll make sure to get you taken care of right away. Now, you can find all of the contact information for Josh and the Pyramid Roofing Company at ksgf.com under the Sarah's Endorsements tab.
Turning Point USA reporter Savannah Hernandez said she took an opportunity to what she described as deprogram a college student at the University of Texas, Austin, who tried to explain why having white privilege meant he had more opportunities than her. Now, this is a white guy. White college student, institution of higher learning. And this is the exchange that he had with Savannah Hernandez.
I grew up as a white man, and you're the exact opposite, you know? And so it's like my experiences are going to be different from yours.
How come?
I think, there's a thing of, like, white privilege.
What privileges do you have that I don't have?
Oh, see, that's the question I keep asking myself because, like, in this day and age, like, all the laws, I say all the laws, you know, it's hard to speak on something I'm not fully knowledgeable of, so, like, I'm sorry if I, like, make a mistake in saying this, but it's
Don't you think it's a problem in society when white people think that they have more privileges than brown or black people?
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the agenda that's pushed off because, personally, it's, like, not that I think I'm more privileged than anyone else because I had to work to get where I was, and that's like the...
So why do you have that mentality immediately where you kind of apologize to me, like, let's talk about privilege, let's talk about I'm a white man in America, so we could have grown up differently.
I got you.
Why is that your first initial reaction to me as a brown woman?
Wow, you're getting me good. See, these are the kind of conversations that I love having. And I think it comes from a place of, like, I wouldn't say caution, but, like, in this day and age, people are so quick to judge and react and cancel. And so I guess it's that like, caution to go into an interview like this. I'm like, I don't know where we're at. But now I know where we're at, and I can, like, go for real.
In a period of 2 minutes, he went from what our society now, our culture, has set in terms of expectations, and that is when you are asked a question, you're not asked this question because we genuinely want to know your answer. We are testing to make sure you understand what you're supposed to say, and that's what he did. Once he recognized, she began asking questions that required thinking, that required answers. This guy was not so far gone that he still was there. There was the light. There was this person, she's reaching out to him, and he's still there inside that body, that the ability to think. And within that 2-minute period of her asking questions, like, why do you think that? What opportunities do you have that I don't? What laws are you referencing? Or do you say the laws are set up in order to benefit you? What laws benefit you but not me? This is the moment that things go one direction or the other. If you have an individual that still has the ability to individually or intellectually take an approach, it goes this way. If not, that's when what we call triggering comes about. That is where you will see a meltdown take place, or the accusations of racism, even if it's a person of color that is asking the question. This is a person that's still there, for which there is still hope. I recall years and years and years ago, it was a moment, it was during one of the pageants. I don't recall which. And it was a question, I believe, about gay. It was a question about leftist politics. And it was one of the first times a question like that had been asked. The questions used to be if you had one wish in the world or if you could go back in time and do one thing. And at some point, they began asking political questions. And I realized in that moment they weren't asking those questions. They don't ask a question about Trump. They don't ask a question about transgenderism. They don't ask a question about LGBTQ issues because as a human being, they're genuinely interested in your thoughts on that. It's because they want to make sure you understand the right answer. And that is a culture that the totalitarian left has been successful in creating, particularly on university campuses, hence this guy's response. It was the auto response. Oh, I've got white privilege. And even he cautiously, when she began asking questions and he sensed that she wasn't somebody seeking to attack him for his answer and accused him of racism, still apologized in case he, quote, said it wrong as a white guy. He prefaced it by saying, now, you understand, I may be talking about something I don't understand because that's what he's been trained is the correct answer. This is what is happening whenever you have MSU and the NAACP, these pull students, particularly students of color, out of class and bus them over to these halls and these classrooms, and they indoctrinate them with it. They're getting everybody in the right mindset to be told, here is what you are supposed to believe. No society ultimately benefits from programming people to be robots that simply regurgitate a mantra. That is called a cult. And that's exactly what the totalitarians on the left want. And sadly, college campuses are a hotbed for their unfortunately successful results in many instances. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. All of your home loan needs, iwantagreathomeloan.com. It starts there. There's a lot of important information there. One of the reasons so many people utilize and return and recommend Don Carricker, Alex, and Anthony is they're very proactive in making sure you know what to do and what not to do. And there's sort of I forget if it's exact 10 commandments, but things not to do once the process begins, things that you might not even think about, but that can throw a wrench. And so in an effort to make sure the process goes as smoothly as possible, these are the proactive attempts that are made by the Carricker team to make sure that you don't do something that's going to cause this red flag. And some of those red flags they may not make sense to you at all. Like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, we're talking about government regulation. So, yes, that is true. Oftentimes it does not. But you don't need to keep all that straight. That's why you have Don Carricker, Alex Carricker, Anthony Carricker, and their team. iwantagreathomeloan.com, because you do. Jen Psaki on MSNBC accidentally giving some insight into Joe Biden and his, what's the best word, his stamina maybe as president?
And that's what people need to hear from him. Now, it's important to note, President Biden does nothing at 9 a.m. He is a night owl. So the fact that he is doing this at 9 a.m. anyway speaks to how vital the White House recognizes it is for him to have his voice out there, conveying that to the American public.
So we're supposed to be very, very impressed that President Joe Biden actually got up by 9 a.m. to address the second largest bank failure in the history of this country. We're supposed to be impressed by this. Does anybody believe he's a night owl? If Joe Biden is a night owl, he is a night owl in the sense that oftentimes a trigger or an alarm gets triggered and Secret Service finds him confused and wandering around the hallways at night. Kamala Harris. There's this feud going on, evidently, between Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris. Elizabeth Warren, because she would not endorse Kamala as vice president. Kamala's angry about it, bitter. Elizabeth Warren has tried twice to call her to no avail. And the ladies, the intellectuals on The View, discussing Kamala Harris and concerns about her as vice president.
I have to say, though, I'm a little surprised. I mean, when she was announced as the VP, I was like, it's all over. She's so accomplished, highly qualified. I'm a little struck by the lack of accomplishments in the policy portfolios she's been given. The border is a big one. It's not a win. No one's going to win. We haven't done major border security or immigration reform since the Bush administration, but she is tasked with overseeing it, and the border crisis keeps getting worse. And I feel like the Biden West Wing isn't necessarily setting her up for success by giving her things that she can go out and champion.
Now, first of all, referring to the Rice University study from earlier, yes, things did get better on the border under Trump, merely by enforcing the laws that existed. But secondly, isn't that an interesting position for a panel of women to take about a female vice president, that the reason she's failing is because Joe Biden has not set her up for success? Is that really what she needs? Is a man to set her up for success, that she can't do it on her own? That is mind-blowingly insightful. That is the position, that the reason Kamala Harris has not been successful is because she hasn't had a man set her up to be. Glenn Beck's next. I'm Nick Reed.